What's good, y'all? Welcome to High Rise Sports. It's your host, Gabe, and this is going to be a series where I break down every team in the league, starting from the worst and making my way up. The team we're going to be looking at today is the Sacramento Kings. There's some debate for the worst roster in the league, but, to me at least, this team is just in a league of their own. I'll just say that. So, this is going to be going section by section, starting with the additions and losses to the front office and the roster. So, let's get into it. For the front office, there's nothing too much going on here. They lose Bobby Jackson, who is an assistant coach, and they bring in no one. So that's all they did there. But there is a lot going on with the roster shakeup this year. The first thing is they salary dumped Devin Carter to the Hawks to get under the second apron. They have a lot of bad contracts on their team right now, so they had to be really careful with who they're giving money. So they just decided to why not just give them to the Hawks for free, which I think it's a pretty bad decision. I'll get into that in a little bit later, and then eventually when I get to the Hawks deep dive as well. But I think he is a pretty good player, and he was far from the worst thing going on with this team. He was more of a positive, in fact. But they waived DeMar DeRozan, who's a pretty good isolation scorer for this team. But the way this team wants to play going into this season, he's more of just an isolation guy, and this team wants to be a transition focused offense, push the pace, and he's getting up there in age. He can't get to the rim the way he used to. So it is a loss for this team, but the way they want to play going forward, not too big of a deal. And then also Russell Westbrook, he was a really good facilitator for this team this year, but also same thing with him as well. He's getting up there in age. He can't run the floor the way he used to. If this was like Wizards Russ we're talking about, maybe even like Lakers Russ, this would be a little bit of a different story, but this is a Russ who's I think 36, 37 years old. So he just really can't go up and down the court the way he used to, especially when it comes to getting to the rim. So I don't think they're going to re-sign him, but he did have a pretty solid year, and I think on a team that wants to be more of a half-court offense, I think you can do a lot worse than Russ, and he still has some good basketball in him. So moving on to the additions, with the seventh pick in the draft, they took Darius Acuff. I thought that this was a great spot for him to go personally. I think that he is a very good prospect. I don't think they reached for him, and for the way that they want to play this year, being that grab the rebound and go kind of team in transition, I think that he's going to be a great addition for this team. It's just kind of concerning though, because I think that he could be a very boomer bust prospect, and this is a team that has just been very bad at developing players, drafting bad. But also, I think as we get into their coach, Doug Christie, even though on a small sample size last year, he got those rookies to play really good, and even a couple of the other young players. So his development's going to be key for this team, but he is the first addition here. Alex Caravan, he was just a high floor guy late in the first round. They're hoping to get something out of him. Jonathan Mogbo, he was buried on the Raptors depth chart, so I barely got to see him at all. DeAndre Hunter here, I'm counting as an addition. He only played 2 games for the Kings last year before having season-ending surgery. I think he fractured his eye socket. It was something really crazy. This is big prove it year for him. We'll get into him a little bit later, but I think that the Cavs utilized him wrong, and that he could have a really good bounce back year because this kind of a system is going to be pretty similar to the Hawks in a lot of ways. So I think he could have a really nice bounce back year. And then lastly, Emmanuel Sharp. He's just 3-and-D guy. And that's really about it. And now moving on to the front office side of things, they might have the worst owner in the entire league. He's been here for so long, and the Kings have made the playoffs one time since he's been the owner. They've only had 2 winning seasons. So I deservedly give him an F grade. He also just can't stop getting in his own way here. He had a hand in taking Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic, Jaren Jackson, and Trae Young, who went directly after him. One of the worst draft mistakes in NBA history. This team has just been terrible at drafting, but it's more than them also just drafting bad. They also just make horrible trades and they have horrible contracts. But going into the trade side of thing as well, they gave up on Tyrese Halliburton way too early, where they got Domantas Sabonis, who has been really good for this team, and this team did make the playoffs that one year, the light the beam team. But Tyrese Halliburton led his team to the finals. He looks like a true franchise guy. He was just seriously hitting game winner after game winner in the playoffs. He was a super clutch, even in the finals as well. They took the Thunder to game 7, and before he went down, he was lighting it up. I remember that. Another Another trade they did as well, Neemias Queta, he's on the Celtics now. They gave up on him too early. I don't think they're beating themselves up too bad over that though, because he really broke through this year, and before this year, he was doing not much for the past 4, 5 years. So I don't think they're beating themselves up that bad over that. But again, that's just another quality player you just let go. By far, though, like the most egregious mistake that this front office made under Vivek's ownership, and he had a hand in this too, allegedly, which I'll show it, was that they had DeMarcus Cousins, and DeMarcus Cousins was a guy where if you built like the right team around him, you can go to the finals. That is my definition of a franchise player is that if you build like the right team around this guy, you have a real chance at going to the finals and winning a championship. And Vivek decided to trade him for a package centered around Buddy Hield because allegedly he thought that he had Steph Curry potential. You trade your superstar player for Buddy Hield because you think that he has Steph Curry potential. This is what I'm talking about. It has just been mistake after mistake after mistake with this team. The Kings had what looks to be a really good draft last year. They got three guys, one of which is an undrafted pickup who I'm honestly like the most excited about. I think that he's basically at his ceiling right now, but for what they got in an undrafted player, he is incredible. We'll get to him later. Dylan Carwell, but Maxime right now they got in the second round. He's a guy who really looks like he can play. I'm a really big fan of his. So, but like outside of last year, this team has just been drafting horribly, and I have no faith in this team going forward under Vivek's ownership. So he gets an F grade for me. He is arguably the worst owner in the entire league. This team has just been a dumpster fire for so long. Moving on to head coach, though, they got Doug Christie, and they fired Mike Brown to bring him in because, of course, the Kings fired Mike Brown to bring in Doug Christie, and then Mike Brown goes on to win a championship this year with the Knicks. Just another incredible move. It's just this team just can't stop getting in their own way. It's just nonstop, year after year after year. But with Doug Christie, I do think that he got like these young players to play pretty good last year. I don't really think that he like elevated like the roster that much with his play calling or like the way they played last year. It was just a complete dumpster fire to watch. Game by game, they just played completely differently. Some games it was like a lot of isolation with Levine and DeRozan. Some games they had Devin Carter running the floor and Russell Westbrook, and then they would kick out to shooters, but this team doesn't have shooters, so they would just shoot up bricks. Or they would also run like sometimes they would also run the pick and roll a lot with right now, and that honestly worked the best. So it was just like game by game, this team just played completely different. And I think, that does have to do with the coaching. You have to find something that works. And I think that he did down the stretch with Ray Now, who had a bunch of 20 plus point games. Like he had an incredible rookie season out of this, the second round pick. But I just don't think that his play calling was good last year, and this offense was just unwatchable last year. So I do think that he got some out of his players, but I just think that as a play caller, as a guy that's constructing an offense, I don't have faith in him to like, if you put him on a different team, let's say you put him on like the Celtics, is he going to elevate the Celtics with his play calling? I don't think so. Like, I just don't think he's that good of a coach, but we'll see. This is very much like a make or break year for him. And he now has the personnel to run what he wants. With this being, he wants this to be a transition based offense. You bring in a bunch of athletes. The rookie point guard you drafted, Darius Acuff, he's going to be able to run the floor really good, really athletic. You got Zach LaVine here. You got DeAndre Hunter. So I like what's going on here. They have the personnel to run what he wants. So this is going to be a very much make or break year. And if this offense comes out this year and they're the worst offense in the league, they're putting up like 104 points a game, just something horrific. That's not out of the realm of possibilities here. He might get fired mid season, but I don't think he's the biggest issue going on here. And I think that there's a world where this offense this year doesn't look that bad, and they look competent. And like the rookie point guard you have, he looks really good. There's just a lot to be seen. He's very much unproven, and there is just a lot that they have to get done. The last two things that I'm going to touch on here that I haven't really touched on is the cap space usage and asset management. This team is willing to use the cap, which is good. Like, this is not a cheap team. Like, they're almost in the second apron right now. They actually had to make some space because you don't want to end up in the second apron in the NBA. You're just kind of screwed if that happens. But they are willing to use the cap, which is great. And then asset management, this is basically like how are you using your cap, how are you using your players, like as trade pieces, what are you doing in free agency, like the assets you have, like what are you doing with them, are you finding steals out there on the trade block, or like what's going on. This team just isn't. De'Aaron Fox, they traded him, they got a decent package for what he is, especially now on the Spurs. He he's on a max contract and he was just straight up horrible in the playoffs. So it could look better going forward, maybe. I do think that he has declined a little bit athletically. So they did get a decent return for him, but I also feel like they could have gotten more. But it's like outside of that, just they, for some reason, after they traded De'Aaron Fox, they're like, oh, let's just go get Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan to compete when it's like you were on track to be a play-in team. So you trade for Zach LaVine's contract, which has been one of the worst in the NBA for years. He's a nice player, but he's getting paid, I think, like a top 20 player in the NBA right now. This is the last year of his deal, though. It was just a player option. So after this, he's hitting free agency. And then also you bring in like DeMar DeRozan. I don't understand what this team is doing half the time. They're just kind of like in their own little world. Terrible at managing their assets. They just let guys walk out the door. They trade for players, like I already mentioned with Tyrese Halliburton. Sabonis's contract right now looks really bad. And also Keegan Murray, I haven't even talked about him. He's a really, really good defender. He's like a all defense caliber defender, but he's on like $150 million deal, and that is aging really, 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 really bad. He is just not really improved his game since his rookie season, offensively at least. And that's another thing that's really holding this team back is just the amount of terrible contracts they have right now. So asset management for them is poor, but it's good that they're willing to spend the cap that they have. So that's nice, but outside of that, that about wraps it up for the front office. Moving on to the starting five, though, I've got the starting five as 65% of the team's final grade. Starters play anywhere between like 28 to 34 minutes a game. 65% of that's roughly 31 minutes. And then also in today's game as well, you need guys that can come off the bench and contribute. Like 10, 15 years ago when we had big threes like the Celtics, for example, or the Heat, starting five was maybe more like 80% of the grade. But in today's game, like the deepest teams are the ones going to the finals. You look at the Knicks, you look at the Pacers, you look at the Thunder, you look at the Spurs, like those teams are loaded. They got 10 guys that can play. Like the Thunder, it's like their entire roster can really play. So that's just like what makes sense to me. Even in a playoff setting where your starters are playing more, you still need those guys that can come off the bench and contribute, especially if there's injuries, which like a lot of them will, get like ankle sprains or kind of be like hobbled. So like they might like play a little bit less in the playoffs. So I think it's a grade that even kind of holds up well in the playoffs. But moving on, I'm going to be going down position by position here, starting with point guard with Darius Acuff. For most of these players, I'm gonna have like short clips and all that to kind of like, I'm gonna be talking about strengths and weaknesses in their game. So I'm like, oh, if this guy's good at getting to the rim or he's good at doing this, I'll show like a short clip for most of the players. I didn't have time for like everybody. There's just a lot of players in the NBA, but for the rookies, I don't have any footage. So I'm just gonna be talking about what I see in him, what I think he's gonna do for this team, my kind of like projection for like what he's gonna be in the league. And I think he's a really nice point guard. They got him seventh overall in the draft. That's about, like maybe even like a little bit low, honestly. Like I just think that it was a really good pick for this team. But again, they have to develop this player. This front office has just been terrible at developing these guys, and I think that he has boomer bust potential. So there is like a real chance that he does bust, and I'll get into that. But like starting off with the strengths, you got a guy that can run the floor, you got a guy that can score at all three levels, you got a guy that can push the pace. There is just so much to like with his game. He's a very polished player. He's a very patient ball handler. Like if he's in the pick and roll and a defender goes in a drop coverage, he'll shoot. Like he's very patient with the ball. It's like he sees the game slow. So you like that going into the league because he's only 19 years old, and it's like he has a very elite feel for the game. He's just I really think that this guy could be a really good player. As another like big positive with him as well I've said he's a very smart ball handler. He's really good at getting defenders in jail on his back hip. So there is just a lot to like with that. He shot 44% from three in college, 44%. So I think coming into the league, like the lines a little bit further back, these guys normally it takes them like a year, 2, 3 years to adjust. But he's a really good 3 point shooter. So 44%. Now he's going to be taking NBA threes. There's better defenders out there, better athletes, and the lines further back. So it's like maybe it drops to 36%. And that's still for a rookie, 36% from three, really, really, really good. Something else in college as well, and I think that like going into the league, at least his rookie year, something he was really good at in college was getting to his elbow jumper. So that's something else you like. He can really score at all three levels. Like he could just be this like dynamic point guard that's just like a beast. Like something, he's only 6'2", but he's really athletic. Like it's kind of hard to put a comp on him, but like maybe he turns into like Trey Young. Like I'm being serious. Like he could be really, really, really good. But also with Trey Young as well, they both have the same weaknesses in that he is a very small point guard, and also just go straight up going into his weaknesses now. This could be the thing that makes him a bust. His defense. I think he's going to be one of the bottom 10 defenders in the league. He might be worse than Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine's also one of the worst defenders in the league, in my opinion. Um, it's just that like with Darius Acuff, he's really bad at navigating screens. He's bad at sliding his feet. He's really small. Like he's gonna get killed out there on defense. So you're hoping that there's room to improve with him. Like we've seen short players be really good at short point guards be really good at defense. We've seen prime Chris Paul was a monster on defense. Like I've seen him even give KD hell when he was in his prime. Another guy like Fred Van Vliet. Fred Van Vliet's even shorter than Acuff. I mean, so is Chris Paul, I think, too. But I think Fred Van Vliet's like 6'1", 6 feet tall, something like that. And he's been a positive defender his entire career as well. So, I mean, it's not impossible for him to become like an adequate, decent defender where he's not holding your team back actively. Like I think after Curry put on some muscle, for example, he's like 6'3" as well. After Curry put on some muscle, I think he's turned into a okay defender. He's not getting killed. Well, now he's getting older. It's a little bit of a different story. But like a few years ago, Curry, after he put on some muscle, he was okay at defense. So like that's just the biggest thing for Acuff moving forward is like if the defense is that bad and the offense doesn't outweigh it, he really has to play offensively like an all-star player. Or I think that he's going to end up out of the league. It's like, what do you do with a guy like even if he's, an 18-8 guy, I don't know if that's good enough, if the defense with him doesn't get better. So there is like real bust potential with him. He's really small as well. So I think that getting to the rim for him at the NBA level, going up against these grown men, these just elite athletes, like the top 0.1% of like athletes in the world, it might be really difficult for him. But also I think that like elbow jumper, he's going to really be able to work and get to that. But so like there's just a lot to like with him, but like really just like the weaknesses with him, it's just all defense. And you're hoping that he can take some strides towards that and be, an okay defender. Like even Trey Young, who's, he's a terrible defender. It's like you have to be that level of offensive player to still like be around in the league, because if you're a guy that can't defend and you're not bringing it like offensively, it's a tough road. But I think that he can be a really good player. I'm rooting for him. His game was really fun to watch in college. But that wraps it up for point guard. And now moving on to shooting guard. I kind of slandered Zach LaVine a little bit already. I'm gonna start with the strengths. We'll get to the weaknesses. I don't want to start with the weaknesses for these guys. I kind of like just like want to go in like sequential order, be like strengths, weaknesses, not just like flip flop around. Um, but yeah, the team weaknesses for this team, the defense of this team is just gonna be terrible. But yes, the strengths for Zach LaVine, he's a really good ball handler. He's a really good shooter. He's a really good on or off ball player. You can run all different kinds of plays for him, all different kinds of actions. You can give him a flare screen. You can run a Chicago action. You can do all different kinds of stuff with him. He's a very, very good athlete. And this team wants to play in transition as well. So you got a guy where he's still he's 31 years old, but he's still like 85, 90% of the athlete he was in his prime. Like that guy, he just man, he could really get going. He still can too. So it's like it's awesome that you have a guy like this in a transition based offense where you're just trying to get the rebound and go, run the full court. So he's going to be really good with that and the half court stuff too. Like this offense is going to like really I think hinge on him in the half court because you can do so much with him as a scorer. He can get to the rim. He can shoot the three at an elite level. He can create his own shot. He can shoot off the dribble. He can shoot from the corner. Like anything you want him to do. Like for the most part, offensively, he can really do. Um, but that's about all he brings. Is like he's a really 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 good scorer, really efficient. But outside of that, is like he's not a good passer. He's a really bad defender. I don't think that he really cares to play defense that much. I think a part of it too is that he's on the Kings. He was on the Bulls. The Bulls were more of a serious team when he was there. They were like a consistent, like decent, okay team. And the Kings now is like, I get it. He got paid. He's on his player option. He's getting a lot of money, and it's like he knows this team isn't gonna win. So like, why bring the effort? There's players like that in the league. He's definitely one of them in my opinion. I just don't really think he cares too much on defense. I think he ball watches too, though. It's not just like a pure lack of effort thing. Like he has like actual like defensive flaws. So like even if he goes into like next year, he's probably not going to be on the Kings. Let's say he goes to like a real team next year, he's still going to be a bad defender. That's just how he is. That's just how he's been. Um, yeah, I think he ball watches. I think he's late to close out. I there's just outside of scoring is like that's just been the story with Zach LaVine for his whole career. Is like it's just he can get you 25 points, an efficient 30 points, but also is like he's just going to get killed on defense. So it's like he puts up, it's kind of mean to say, but he puts up like a lot of like empty calorie stats. But for Darius Acuff's development here as like a rookie, and they're looking at him as like, the future, like maybe franchise player of this team, you know what I mean? So I think Zach LaVine's going to be a great piece in that this year of making this offense competent because if, Darius Acuff's out here, the offense is horrible. His confidence is just shot by the end of the year because this team just cannot hit any open shots. This team is just horrible. Like they're the worst offense in the league, and it just really starts like messing with his like mental. Then he could maybe turn into a bust off of that as well. That's not impossible. We've seen what's happened. Ben Simmons, for example, is like the most infamous case of this. Is just he just completely lost his confidence. But it's just super nice for Zach LaVine to be here, though, because he's going to be a big part of Darius Acuff's development. Having a guy like him who can space the floor, who can score, 25, 30 points, just go absolutely crazy. I think it's going to be really good for his development. Like the way that this team has to look at it right now is like, let's just try to develop our young players, see what we have, give them the best chance to succeed. That's the way they need to look at this thing. Not do some stupid thing at like the deadline where it's like, oh, let's just go take a swing so we can be a play-in team or try to be a play-in team. Because that's just like what the kind of moves this team has made. That's what they did with Zach LaVine. So I like Zach LaVine. I think that when he's on a manageable contract, he's making next year, he signs like a 3-year, $75 million contract, something more manageable. He's going to be a really nice piece of a good team. Maybe a team like the Nuggets goes out and gets him. I have no idea. Just like a team like really needs a really nice score, but for this year, he's going to be a really nice part in the development of these young players because he just has that level of gravity because he's that level of offensive player. So it's really nice. I'm glad he's here. I think Kings fans, should look at it that way as well. Is like he's here. He's going to be really good in the development for our young guys. Even though he's on a terrible contract, whatever. He's going to help out a lot in that way. So that's nice. But moving on to small forward with DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre Hunter was really bad on the Cavs. The Hawks kind of sold high on him. I just think that he was a really bad fit on the Cavs, but maybe this is who he is now. I don't think it is, but there's a possibility of that. He was just really, really, really bad on the Cavs. But going into this team at more of a transition based offense, you could have a really good point guard as well. This is a guy where, like the Hawks, for example, they were a full court team as well. If you look at like the pace stats, if you look at the transition offense stats, they were among the top in the entire NBA the past, I actually checked this for DeAndre Hunter like the past 4 or 5 years. So he was in that kind of an infrastructure where he is like great in the full court. He's a really good full court player. Um, he can shoot, he can get to the rim, he can use his size, he can finish through contact. He also has a mid-range game he can go to. I just really think he was like criminally utilized last year on the Cavs, where they were trying to have him be this 3-and-D defensive wing. That's why they traded for him. That just didn't make much sense to me. And yeah, it really didn't work out that well, where it's like, no, this is a guy where he wants, he needs to play on a team that plays at a high pace, that's out there in the full court in transition. A team like the Hawks, a team, that's how the Kings want to play this year, a team like the Rockets, a team that's just, let's just sprint down the court, find an open lane, let's go. That's the kind of offense he needs to be on, and that's just not the way he was really utilized last year. It was just, oh, let's have him sit on the wing or sit in the corner as a spot up guy. It's like, just that's not who he is. The point guard play he had last year too with Darius Garland, he missed a lot of time. He got traded before James Harden got there, so he really didn't have like the best point guard play. The Cavs were just really like desperate when it came to that. They had Donovan Mitchell playing some point, experimenting a little bit. That was a train wreck. So it was just like for DeAndre Hunter, that kind of an environment was like a worst case scenario for him. Uh, like he really just wants to live in the full court. But this also leads into his biggest flaws is that as a half court player, he's pretty bad. Like his ball handle is terrible. His touch around the rim is really bad. He's like a right hand dominant player. I don't think that he can really play with both hands like that. He can attack hard closeouts and get to the rim, but yeah, his handle sucks. He'll turn the ball over a lot. It just it just wasn't the best infrastructure for him. And the Cavs can play fast, but like they're more of like a middle of the road team when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think that this is a great year for him to show what he can really do. I think on the defensive end as well, he's not some like defensive stopper, you know what I mean? He's not going to come out here and hound the best player on the court, but he does have a 7'2" wingspan. He is a switchable defender. This is a team that desperately needs defense. But yeah, I just think that he's going to have a nice little bounce back year, maybe average something like 17 points, come back to shooting 36, 38% from three and really earn himself a nice contract because he is on an expiring contract after this year is over. So I do like the pickup with him. They did trade for him. They didn't give up like the house or anything, and his value was low. So it's not a terrible trade, and he's going to really fit what they want to do. So I like the trade. Hope this works out. I think it will work out, but I still have that double arrow on him just because there's a chance that this is who he is now, and he's just he's going to be at this level or get worse. But also the other side of that arrow, and that's what I think is going to happen, is that he's going to really improve and take strides, and get back to where he was on the Hawks in a better infrastructure that works better for him. Having Darius Acuff, who's I think he's going to be a really good facilitator out the gate. So I really like the signing. But moving on now to power forward with Keegan Murray. He's this team's defensive stopper. Like I've said before, I think he's an all defense caliber guy. So he's going to be, like the main point of attack guy is going to be on these defensive assignments. He has looked really good against all-star level competition. He has had to take the challenge multiple times against guys like Donovan Mitchell, against guys like Steph Curry, and just hound them on the perimeter. And even though he's a power forward, he can do that. He's a really nice player, but getting 150 million for him, I've said it's a little, it's definitely a little much. But he's really good at both phases on defense, on and off the ball. He can be that weak side defender. He's also really good at navigating screens. He's a really good shot blocker, even on the perimeter. He has a really good wingspan. I think he's a 6'11" or like a 7-foot wingspan. He has really good anticipation for shooters as well. Like he can just swat shots on the perimeter. So you like that. He's a guy who averages like routinely every year over a steal and a block every game. He's just a very suffocating player to score on. Like the way he plays defense is different than a lot of players, is that he's not going to foul a lot because he plays defense with his chest a lot instead of his hands. And that's a really good skill to have. And he can really do this too. Like despite him being, not like the strongest guy, not the biggest guy, he can play defense with his chest because his lower body, he's got like a really strong base. So like he doesn't get moved really. Like it's just like really, really like suffocating the way he plays defense on people, like it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Jaden McDaniels in a way, where it's like he can just put someone in jail and they just look completely helpless. So he's really good for that. He just doesn't get the recognition he deserves because he plays on the Kings. Really, no one on the Kings gets the recognition they deserve if they're good. But he has been an all defense caliber guy, and he's never made a all defense selection. So it's kind of surprising. But moving on to offense with him, this is going to be pretty brief. He is just almost strictly like a catch and shoot guy. He had a really down year, but I think that that can be explained. 36% of his shots this year were catch and shoot, and this is by far the lowest mark of his career. The next lowest year was his second year in the league, where he shot 46% catch and shoot shots. That was 46% of his shot diet versus this year, that's way lower. Like he is a strictly catch and shoot guy. He was, he's normally very good at catch and shoot shots. It's just that this year he was asked to do a bigger role than he's used to, and he just completely fell flat because I think that this is who he is, and he's just completely stalled out. And that's fine. It's just that his contract is really high. I will say though, he can get to the basket. He can finish through contact sometimes, but offensively is just he doesn't provide too much. He is pretty athletic though, so I think in more of a transition based offense, he will look better. Like if you see a team like the Miami Heat, for example, this has been a team where they've drafted so many guys in the middle of the first round, late first round. They're a competitive team every year. Their roster just hasn't been the best, but they're still like a frisky team just because they play at a really high pace. Their players buy into like what they're doing. And it is a way how you can bridge the skill gap of like, hey, they might be better than us, but if we play faster, if we play harder, go out there in the full court, sprint, get in the lanes, and just get to the basket, try to body someone. You know, Keegan Murray is a pretty good athlete, so I think that there is a world where maybe this year too he kind of has this breakthrough like resurgent season. People are like, oh, Keegan Murray's finally here. He's averaging like 16, 17 points a game, pretty good efficiency. The 3-point percentage comes back. I don't know though, and I don't really think so. So I think that this is kind of who he is just a guy who's kind of an offensive liability. Hopefully the 3-point percentage this year comes back up for him. He's just been a guy where he's just been stagnant since like a rookie. He was really good as a rookie. People thought, oh, he has so much promise, and he's a very good defensive player for sure. But offensively, he just really hasn't improved. So I'm really hoping this year that he can make some serious strides and prove that he's worth that $150 million contract. But he is a really nice player, really good defender. He needs to get more recognition for that. That he's like, probably a top 15 defender in the league. But yeah, I like him. I just don't like the contract he's on. But as his team's primary defensive stopper, he's really, really good. But moving on to center, the center position of this team is by far the deepest and the best on the team. This is one of the deepest center groupings in the entire league. Might even be the deepest center position in the entire league just because of last year's draft. How good last year's draft was for this team. They got two extremely good centers. I mean, like we're going to talk about Dylan Carwell soon, but yeah, he was an undrafted guy, just unbelievable player. But first, we're going to talk about Domantas Sabonis. He's a very unique player. He's one of these like playmaking centers that we see now, like it's kind of like a new type, kind of sprung by like Nikola Jokic, just him being just this generational playmaker for the position, just like one of the best, passers of all time. But we're seeing some of these guys now start to change and come out. And Domantas Sabonis is like one of these playmaking centers. His father was as well, Arvidas. But there's a few of these guys in the league now. Like we're starting to see. I saw Cat in the playoffs. They were using Cat. The Knicks were using Cat as this kind of like pass hub at the top of the key. We see Yusuf Nurkic do this too, where he's this pass hub at the top of the key. Sabonis is like a really nice facilitator, though. He can operate out of the high post, the low post. He's really good in the DHO game. Call him a DHO merchant. I wouldn't really say that's fair. It does take skill to hand off and set a screen without fouling, getting like a moving screen violation. We see, for example, Rudy Gobert. He's not the best at this. He's not good at a lot of offensive things. We'll say that, but this isn't about him. This is about Sabonis. It does require execution and timing to pull off consistently. As a scorer, though, he's like a pure interior, center, like one of these old school 2000s bigs, like Shaq or a Zach Randolph, just like one of these kind of unconventional play styles today, as this just like pure, just dominating interior force. He's got really good touch around the rim. He can shoot from three. This year, he got injured. He didn't play that much, but like the past couple years, we've been seeing him now. Like he'll take one or two threes a game, shoot it like 36%, but it's not really like, off ball gravity. If you're taking like one or two threes a game and you're shooting it at like 35%, because like other, defenders are just going to sag off him and play help defense. It's like, oh, if he makes the three, he makes the three. But yeah, he's not much of like a mid-range scorer at all, and it's cool that he can occasionally shoot a three, But he shot 61% from the restricted area this year. It's very good for a pure interior guy. Defenders know exactly the way he wants to score. Another huge positive of Sabonis, and this is probably the best thing about him, is that I think he won three straight rebounding titles. He's just been one of these just dominating rebound forces, and he's only 6'10", but he can go out there and average 13, 14 rebounds. He'd just be this just glass cleaner, this just monster in the paint. He isn't without his flaws though, even though he is a great rebounder. He isn't a good rim protector at all. He averages something like half a block a game. I don't really care too much personally about box score stats. I like to see how these guys actually play instead of being like, oh wow, he look at him, bro. He gets 2 blocks a game, or he does like, oh look at the box score. I like watching these guys. I think the eye test with Sabonis, he's not a good rim protector or like paint protector at all. I think his positioning in the paint's okay, so he can contest shots by the rim, but like another issue today is like there's just so many good slashers in the game. You see Tyrese Maxey, you see Ja Morant. There's so many of these guys today that can just get to the paint. And if you don't have a really good rim protector, I mean, they're just going to score on him every single time, especially, if it comes to the playoffs. If he's your starting center and he's not a good rim protector, he's just he's going to get killed in the playoffs against teams that where he's forced to go up against a team that has one of these guys eventually, if not in the first round, if this team somehow miraculously made it, or at any point in his career, after the Kings, because I don't think he's going to be here too much longer. They have a couple young guys on the horizon, it looks like. He's not like a switchable defender either, even though he's 6'10. I think a Bam Adebayo is about this height. He's like 6'9", 6'10". He's really good on the perimeter. Sabonis is not good on the perimeter. He's got slow feet. Someone just beat him off the dribble. So he's kind of a defensive liability. I think his positioning in the paint's pretty good though to contest shots, but it's just not good enough if you don't put like a lid on the rim as a guy who's going to be making, this high tier level of money, trying to be on like a winning team eventually. It's going to be really tough for him after the saga on the Kings is over and he's going to go somewhere else. And then also I think he's 30 years old. He's starting to get up there in age a little bit. For we see these pure interior centers. These guys rely a lot on physicality. They don't have as much finesse, and we see them start to fall off a little bit around this time. I don't think he's just going to become washed next year or 2 years from now, but I don't think that he's going to be in his prime for too much longer. And then after it's over, he's still going to be a really nice rebounding center and piece. But it's just like, I don't know. Like, I think the Kings would probably like want him to go out this season and look really good, maybe try to trade him. But also, it's like, who wants to trade for a guy who he's going to be your starting center? But like, I don't know what team is okay with a starting center that can't really play good defense. It's just kind of like a really weird thing to where it's like you have to have a team that has like a really like elite four, like like a Jaden McDaniels, something like that. Maybe an Aaron Gordon, like this like really good like weak side guy, or a guy who could play the four and the five. So I don't. I think that he is a guy he's going to be on the trade block, but I don't know who's going to really want to trade for him. But he is a really nice player. He's a very strange player. He's kind of polarizing, where it's like, just how good is he? I've always felt that way about him. I don't I don't care about 2K ratings at all, but I remember man, it was probably like 2K like 23 or 24, and then like the discussion around him was like, oh, he's like a top 5 center in the league, you know. This guy was like a 93 on 2K or something, and then now I just remember him plummeting like this year too. He's just plummeting and plummeting down to like the low 80s now. It's just kind of funny. He's just always been this like really polarizing player, but I think he's a good player. He just has to go on the right team. But as like a facilitator, he can be this kind of hub. He can score in the paint. He can theoretically like stretch the floor a little bit, So he's a nice player. He's going to be nice for this team. Um, I don't know. I'm not the biggest on him, but he's cool. But moving on to the bench now. I'm going to start with the key rotation. This for me is 25% of my final grade, and then the depth is the final 10%. But like I've said, I really do value the bench. In today's game, you got to have a deep bench if you want to win a championship. And this team's bench, it's not bad. They got varying skill sets, especially the center position. Both of these centers here, Dylan Cardwell and Ray now, they play very different ways, very different players. So it's nice that you have a bunch of varying skill sets, guys that can just do a bunch of different things. But starting with Malik Monk, he's just like fun spark plug type player, He's he's been deep in six man of the year voting a couple times. He hasn't won six man of the year, but I think he's either been like runner up or third place a couple times. He's just going to be the spark plug guy to come off the bench and just hit big shots. He does really help with the spacing on this team. Like when he's hot, he goes off for like 5, 6, 7 threes, 20, 25 points. Absolutely lights it off. Absolutely lights it up. He can just single handedly win you games. He's been in the league for a while though, so like there is some wear and tear on his body. I don't know how much longer he's going to be in his prime. He came into the league at 19. He's 28 years old now, but he's still a nice player. He is also like one of these combo guard types where he's a shooting guard, but he's asked to play point guard. It's like he has positional versatility, but it's like if he's asked to play point guard, he's more of a score first kind of guy. It's just like the way his brain is wired. I think his biggest strength as a passer is in the pick and roll game. This team has really good rollers, but he can drive, he can kick, he can throw up lobs. So that's nice. He can also just do like some normal point guard stuff, take the ball up the court, find an open shooter, draw defenders, do some of that, but he's a guy where you don't want him to be the like primary ball handler slash facilitator guy for too long. These combo guard types, there's not too many of them where it's like you want them to like be your main point guard, outside of probably James Harden. There's just not too many of these guys in the league where it's like, as a secondary guy, as a secondary facilitator, or a guy to come off the bench and, do that if you don't have anybody else. It's like, yeah, sure, but ideally you want him out there with Acuff or whoever else, like maybe they sign another point guard and he can play like those shooting guard minutes, but also kind of be that secondary facilitator, help open up the offense because with ball handlers, that's how you create advantages. Like having guys that can drive and kick, just open up the offense. Like your team, you want to have ball handlers. He is a smaller guard too. He is pretty quick as well, and he has a good handle. So it is nice to have him be like your secondary playmaker, but he's really just here to space the floor and just be this like streaky shooter. Um, when he's hot, he's really hot. But also another thing with him too is it's like yeah, he's a very streaky shooter. Pre All Star break this year, he was shooting 42% from three, and then post All Star break, he was shooting 33% from three. But he is a very nice player to have, especially for like these younger guys as well. We're talking about let's get these rookies, or these young players in general, second, third year players, whatever, in the league, surround them, and, in the right infrastructure to help them with their development, help them with their growth. And, Malik Monk came into the league at 19. Darius Acuff is 19. They can relate, and he seems like a really great locker room guy. So he also brings value off the court. And I think that's something that's like really underrated is like some of these guys in the league are just paid to be these, great locker room dudes. Like we see right now with DeAndre Jordan, for example. He seems like a really good vet presence over there, and he's getting paid to basically do that at this point, and he's actually, I don't even think he's on a vet minimum. I just think it's that the Pelicans really like what he does for that team off the court, where it's like, hey, he can really help these young guys, get them out of trouble, help them develop, help them grow, teach them to be professionals. So it's very nice to have a player like this on the team because not every team has a vet presence like this, you know. And he's also like a pretty respected player as well. You know, he's not this like vet that's just been like a career bum. You know, his entire career, it's like, oh, I'm 32 years old, you know, but oh, my best season I was averaging 8 points in like 10 minutes. Like, no, like Malik Monk is a very good, you know, he's been a very good player in his career. So I think that, you know, these young guys do look up to him and respect him. It's not like, man, I'm not listening to this old guy. What is he talking about? Why should I listen to him? You know, so he's definitely earned his stripes, and he's going to be, you know, probably a part of this team moving forward. I don't think he's going to get traded. Maybe he gets traded. You know, he does definitely have value. I could see him ending up on the trade block, but I really think they should keep him around, and I like Malik Monk. Next up, we got Neat Clifford. I'm not necessarily too excited about Neat Clifford. He was a fifth-year player out of Colorado, late first-round pick. He went 24th overall. He's going to be going into his second season now. But like with being a 5-year player, he was expected to, you know, step in immediately. And it's like, oh, if this guy can play in the NBA, he's going to, you know, play right now. You know, show us like what he can do. Not like really a developmental guy because he played in college for 5 years. I think he did that. I'm not really too excited about him though. I think he could maybe end up in that rotational player tier. He just has to get better at shooting the three because he's very much just going to be this just, you know, dime a dozen 3-and-D archetype of guys. But I think he's also a solid off ball cutter. So there is some value in that. But offensively, you know, he just has to work on that 3 point shot, but he had a 6 steal game actually, which is really nice. And his final 6 game stretch of the season, he averaged 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists. So he ended the season hot, and he also showed a lot of promise. I just don't really think that he's going to amount to too much in the league. He'll probably stick around for a while, bounce around from team to team, but I don't view him as this like, you know, guy that a team is just like really, you know, like, oh, this could be like a really nice piece for us. I think he's fine. You know, this is probably about his ceiling. I think defensively, he's pretty good at generating turnovers, at playing the passing lanes. He doesn't gamble for passes. He's like a smart defender. He's not just out there like, oh, you know, this is my 6 steal game. I'm gonna gamble for every pass. I don't care how much they score on us or if I'm out of position. You know, he's not one of those guys. Like you know, he wants to play winning basketball, but he's just, you know, it's very serviceable. You know, you could definitely do worse than him. And for a late first round pick, you know, he's probably exceeded this a little bit because most, you know, late first round picks, it's like they're out of the league in 3 years. He'll probably stick around a little bit longer than that, you know. And if he really does work on his 3 point shot or he becomes like a way better off ball cutter kind of guy, you know, then he could carve out a serious role in the league. But I'm not too high on him. He's just like a fine, okay player. I don't think his like on ball stuff is the best either. He's not a good ball handler. He's like not good at getting to the rim. You know, like not really much on ball creation with him. But you know, he did show that flash at the end of the year. But you know, just he's whatever. But moving on to Precious Achua, he's been, you know, he's a very serviceable defensive wing. A lot of Knicks fans were pretty sad to see him go. You know, he was kind of like a fan favorite player. He can guard multiple positions, even though he's only 6'8" too. He also does play like small ball center. Like he is a 6'8" guy who does play center, but he can also play the four. He can, you know, he can guard multiple positions. Um, he's a really good rebounder. He's a really good offensive rebounder as well. But like it's just like a cheap defensive option. You know, you can do a lot worse than him. The issue with him though is that he's a non-shooter, and this is a team that again just is going to really struggle with spacing. So he doesn't bring you too much offensively, but you know, as a team that's just like needs better defense because last year that it was just laughable how bad this team was on defense. You can definitely do a lot worse than that, and for him to come in the minutes he plays and kind of hold it down a little bit, you know, sure, why not? That's not too bad. So he's a nice player, but nothing special. Moving on to center though with Maxime right now, and I've been talking about these, you know, this draft class they just had last year with these two centers. This is a guy to really get excited about. I think that he could be a really good player. He was a really good player last year. He had multiple 20-point games. He had 13 20+ point games last year. I think I watched him like live drop like a 30+ bomb. I don't remember who it was against, but I was like, damn, like he's really good. He's really good in the short roll. Like especially like this is something that the Kings really leaned on heavily last year was like, all right, let's go run the pick and roll with Russell Westbrook and with Ray now or Devin Carter as well. Would like run the pick and roll with him, get him in that short roll, get him to that push shot, just like try to find ways to create, have like these off ball players like run around, cause distractions, get him like a really nice look at that push shot. Like this was something that he was really good at, and he was going off. Like he was the reason why the Kings were winning some of these games. Like this push shot he has, like he has a go to move already. As a rookie, that's something you really like to see because like some of these guys, we're gonna get to the Pistons eventually, but their center over there, he has no go-to move at all, and it showed up in the playoffs. It's just, like he's got a pretty polished game as a rookie coming into the league, and now he's going on to his second season, hoping to see some nice development from him. But he's not just like a push shot guy as well. Like he shot 74% in the restricted area. He's got some really nice touch around the rim. He's pretty good in the low post. He's not a great rebounder, but he's a solid rebounder. He's not horrible on defense either. He's like okay on defense. So, but he could be like a real part of this Kings team moving forward. Is this just like building block? Like, hey, we got Maxime. Like maybe him and Acuff could like turn into this like really good point guard center duo. But I like what's going on here with him, and I think that he could ascend into that like good starter tier someday. Maybe I don't know if I'll go as far as going to like, he might be in that all star tier someday, but I think he can get into that good center tier because I think like, he definitely had a lot of games where he was playing like that. So he's really exciting. I like him. I'm gonna definitely tune into some Kings games to watch him. He's a pretty fun player to watch. I like the way he plays, and I just think he fell in the draft because I think he went to Stanford. He was just in college for a long time. Not the most traitsy athletic guy, but he's a guy who can really play, and he got overlooked because just you see all these scouts and stuff. It's more so in like the NFL than the NBA, but it's like, oh, he needs to have a 40-inch vertical. Oh, he needs to be able to bench like I think in the NBA combine it's like 185. Oh, he needs to get this up for X amount of reps and like do all this stuff, and it's like, but can he play basketball? So I think that's why he fell in the draft is he just got kind of overlooked as this older guy, but I really like him. But man, moving on to my like favorite player on this team, Dylan Cardwell. Holy crap. This guy can absolutely play. He's another one of these guys where he played at college for, quite a while. But, and he somehow went undrafted. I have no idea how, because like this guy as a rookie, he just didn't get like the minutes to, be in that rookie of the year, vote race. And, I don't think he would have won it last year. But if he was playing starter minutes, people would definitely know who he is. I don't think many people even know who this is. But as an undrafted pickup, I think like last year, he was a top 10 rim protector in the entire NBA as a rookie. Now, I do think that this is about his ceiling, but just like what he brings you defensively and even a little bit offensively. I'll touch on that soon too, but just defensively, his positioning is just really, really, really good. He's really good at blocking shots as well, just like really good at contesting shots around the rim, keeping his hands up, using his length. Like he is just such a nice player to have. And then also as a rebounder, also as a as a rebounder last year, I'm talking, oh, he was a probably a top 10 defensive center in the league last year. He was also like a top 10 rebounding center in the league last year. It's just that he didn't have like the minutes to necessarily reflect that unless you look at things like per 36. I'm not necessarily the highest on that, but he has a really high motor, so I think he would about live up to those stats. But his offensive rebound percentage last year was 17.6%, which is really crazy. Like a good mark for a center to have, being like, oh, this guy's a like a really nice offensive rebounder is 10%. So he's sitting at 17.6%, and this puts him in like roughly the territory of like Steven Adams and Andre Drummond. So he is a very, very good offensive rebounder. I like him a lot. Now his like weaknesses, it's just like all offensive stuff. Outside of offensive rebounding, that like getting your team extra possessions really matters. He's like a really high motor. He plays really hard, and he will like generate fouls and stuff just because of how hard he crashes the glass. Like he's always looking to crash the glass. Like, oh, his teammate's taking a three, man, he's gonna try to run in there and get that rebound. And if he grabs that rebound, someone's a lot of times someone fouls him, and it's another possession for his team. Like that stuff just doesn't really show up on the stat sheet. but that I do count that as like, overall, player offense, even though he's not scoring or facilitating or anything like that, getting your team extra possessions and just being that nuisance in the paint, that that it contributes to offense. It just doesn't show up on the stats, but he does a lot of that stuff. Outside of that, he really has no offensive game, but I think in a transition, oriented offense like this year, where he's going to be able to like run the middle of the lane, like this is like what they teach centers to do in transition. You run the middle of the lane, you get to the paint, try to body someone, try to get to the foul line, just like race down the floor. He's going to do that. He's also, he can work as a lob threat, but he's just really not going to provide you much outside of just running and dunking, you know. But yeah, I think for a team, like if a team really needs like a center, like a starting center, I think he could definitely start on some teams in the NBA, and then also as a backup center, he'd probably just be like the best backup center in the NBA. Yeah, I don't think Mitchell Robinson is a backup anymore. I think he's starting on the Celtics now, and Kata's on the bench. So he's such a nice player, but yeah, I think he's just gone completely under the radar. No one really knows who he is outside of me, probably like diehard Kings fans. But I really like him a lot, and I think that like yeah, he could be a piece that puts a team over the top. Like imagine if the Nuggets got this guy. You've heard about the like oh like Jokic is on the bench in the playoffs and like the announcers everyone's saying like oh can they survive the non-Jokic minutes. If you have Dylan Cardwell, you definitely can because he's going to protect the rim and they're not going to be able to score that well at the rim. So I really like him a lot. He's just he's like a winner. Like he just does like so many little things that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but like this guy is like if I'm building a championship team, like I'm building a team where I want to win a title, give me I want him. Like he is a really good player. Give me Dylan Cardwell. I really like him a lot. I don't think he's going to really get too much better from here, but that's perfectly fine because he is a really, really nice player. I like him a lot. For the rest of these bench pieces, I don't really have too much to say about them at all. I've got like just some brief notes on them. Just going to go over them, fly through them pretty fast. Starting with Isaiah Stevens, he's a 5'11" point guard. He is a true point guard. He's a really good passer. He plays solid defense. I don't really know if he's going to stick around the league. You don't really see 5'11" players anymore. But yeah, he's pretty solid for what he is. Alex Carabin, high floor guy, probably not going to develop too much from here if he sticks. But he was a pretty good shooter in college, solid cutter, just not the best traits. I don't really think he's going to stick around for too long. Adam Flagler, he was a pretty good G League player. He's going to be 27 at the end of the year, though, so he's just kind of like getting his NBA shot now. He's probably not going to stick, just like one of these two-way types. And then Emmanuel Sharp, he's a 3-and-D guy. There might be a path for him to play. This is a team that like really needs spacing. If an injury happens, I could see him getting some minutes. He was also a really good shooter in college. He's also at a good summer league. He's a 6'3" guard, so he's tall enough, but he's on the smaller side. But I've heard good things about him, so like maybe he sticks around on this team a little bit. We'll see. And then Manuel Plowden, he's just a two-way 3-and-D wing guy. I'm not really too familiar with him. And then lastly is Jonathan Mogbo. He was on the Raptors. He barely got any playing time. He looks like he's about to be out of the league this year. He might get cut this year. We'll see what happens with him, I guess. But that basically wraps up the depth. But then moving on to the final part of this, it's just like an overall summary and like some of my closing thoughts with this team. Yeah, I've got the keys to success here is what I'm calling it. Basically, just like green lights that these teams have to hit if they want to hit their ceiling or like want things to go well, like whatever their goals are for this season. Um, the Kings, they're not really trying to win, but they do have some green lights they want to hit. Darius Acuff's development. That's a big one, obviously. They drafted him 7th overall. He's a guy where he looks like he could be a really good point guard. So you're hoping that, like he takes some good strides this year and shows that, he can definitely play in the league and play at a high level and maybe be this team's, hope going forward. DeAndre Hunter's bounce back season is the second one here. He just had a really bad year on the Cavs, but I think he's going to have a bounce back year. And if he does, this team's going to win some more games. And then lastly, Doug Christie, he needs to like prove himself, prove that he can be a good play caller, get this team humming, and then also on like the defensive side, he says that like he wants this team to like be like kind of like defensive oriented. They don't really have the best defensive players, especially in the starting five for that outside of like Keegan Murray. So but if this team comes out this year and with these new additions, the offense looks better, maybe the defense isn't as horrible, and you're like going forward, it's like, hey, there's some things to work with here, and Doug Christie sticks, and he proves that he can be a decent head coach, then that's another great key to success instead of this just like head coach carousel of just let's bring in one guy, oh he doesn't work out, let's bring in another guy. They need someone who can stick, because of course they just had to fire Mike Brown because it's the Kings. They just had to do that. But team strengths and weaknesses, I've got transition offense and pick and roll for them. They're probably going to be a pretty solid transition offense team. Push the pace. They've got the personnel to do what they want to do in the pick and roll as well, for sure. That's why I have that as like a strength. We've got Darius Acuff getting to that elbow jumper. He's going to be able to like really run the floor. He's gonna be really good in the pick and roll. I've touched on like Malik Monk is pretty good in the pick and roll as well, and you've got Ray now really good in the short roll. So like you got a lot of stuff to work with here, and then like the dribble handoff stuff as well is gonna be pretty nice. But just defense with this team is going to be terrible, both the perimeter and interior defense. Now, if Dylan Cardwell plays, he's the third string center on this team, so he's probably not going to get too many minutes because you can't really play him at the four. He is just he is a center, and then like right now he he can shoot the three. If you like leave him wide open, he'll shoot like Sabonis like one or two wide open threes a game. But I wouldn't really say he's a four. Um, but like the defense of this team is just going to be, I expect it to be probably the worst in the league again, uh, or like around the worst, I mean. And then lastly, 3-point shooting. They've got better 3-point shooters on this team now. It's not enough. I'll just say that it is definitely not enough for this team going forward. But yeah, I don't think this team is going to win too many games. I've got them projected to win, roughly 20 to 30 games. This roster too, there's just so many issues with this roster. I think from like a schematic standpoint, they've got various skill sets. They've got like these players that will work well together for sure. To be to look like a competent NBA offense, unlike last year where it was just a dumpster fire. Like it was this roster last year was just so bad. But I think that this is a better team this year, but they could also just be the worst team in the league again, which they probably will be. I feel like there's a gap between the Kings and other teams, but you could definitely argue that like there's a couple other teams that might be worse, maybe. But I've got them expected to win 20 to 30 games, 20 games. If they win 20 games, they're going to be the worst team in the league. If they win 30 games, they're going to be like a bottom five team in the league. So they're just looking for these young guys to develop. But yeah, I really hope you guys like this video. I'm going to be trying to do this for every single team in the league. I've had a lot of fun making this. But yeah, I'll see y'all next time.